Hello friends and fans of renewables, and welcome to another video. Today we'll be talking about the energy generation reality facing us today in 2022, and discussing perhaps some things you may not be aware of. We'll start by proving how accurate sustainable transportation predictions became from about a decade ago, and move on to similar predictions in energy storage and generation. Before we get comments on how it's not possible, guys, to run a society on renewables, and how oil and gas is the most efficient and important thing out there, let me just say one thing, okay? We would not be here if not for oil and gas, right? I agree, I admit that. It certainly got us here, and it made this transition possible to something better now, right? We ought to be grateful for the energy solutions oil and gas has provided in the last 130 years. Absolutely, no doubt about it. However, just because it has done so, it does not mean that the energy systems in use cannot be changed or renewable, or just more efficient and better and less expensive, right? And wouldn't that be an awesome solution? So, moving on. If you look at Tony Seba's work, he made a presentation last year in August of 2021, link below. He clearly proves how new disruptive technologies have already rewritten the rules in energy and transportation now. So this is not something that's coming up and it's about to take over, but it's already happening right now, okay? So let's get into it. He explains how accelerators help this disruption and how quickly the adoption of this new tech happens, and is often illustrated by an S-curve, right? Not a straight linear slow increase, but an S-curve that once it hits a tipping point shoots right up, almost in an exponential way, right? So Tony was very accurate in plotting the cost declines of lithium batteries, and he is also very much on point presenting the cost declines of renewable energy supply. In his book, in his 2014 book, Clean Disruption, Tony published his take on the disruption of transportation, and he was correct in predicting a fully electric vehicle with over 200 miles of range by 2020 at the same median price as an ICE vehicle. He was 100% correct, because if you look at the Tesla Model 3 base model, it certainly happened. And it was roughly at the median price for a new vehicle in 2020. And there were also many Chinese-made vehicles that also had a range of over 200 miles that were below this price, available in China at the year 2020. So he was absolutely correct. And if you think about making a prediction like that, that's pretty ballsy and pretty accurate. You have to applaud that, right? He was very much correct. Tony made a prediction in 2018 about oil demand peaking in 2020 and then dropping for the foreseeable future. COVID, the pandemic, definitely made this prediction true for a little while, because we even saw negative prices for a moment in oil and gas due to the pandemic. And now the prices have bounced back, but looking to the future, I guess a good time to revisit this prediction would be in 3 to 4 years and see how the demand for oil will be affected by the disruption of renewables in mid-decade, right? That would be a good time to check. He also talks in his book about parking, that will also be will be obsolete very much before the end of the decade, as transportation as a service comes online and disrupts a lot of other segments of the economy. The longevity of vehicles is also disrupted by this new transition by a factor of 7, as he states in his book. In other words, the average electric vehicle, pure battery, not hybrid, will be on the roads for roughly 7 times longer than the typical internal combustion engine vehicle. Now, this is very important for fleets, cities that run buses and trucks and all kinds of other vehicles. This On an individual level, this is also a benefit, but the true huge movement of the needle in mass economic sense is in the fleet side of things, commercial fleets, right? So, and where safety data is available, such as in Tesla's full self-driving and autopilot systems, data shows that the new technology is also making drivers 8.7 times safer today. This was data gathered in 2021 than when drivers are driving without the same technology, right? So what I'm describing here and what Tony is describing is the convergence of many technologies coming together, kind of like they did to create the iPhone, right? They're coming together now in energy and transportation, which is something that has never happened before. But now we get to enjoy the fruits of all this labor that was put in before, and we have this reduced cost, increased safety, increased efficiency outcome as a result to be happy about. So by 2030, according to Tony in his book from 2014, Clean Disruption, 60% of global vehicles will not be individually owned, but rather owned by fleets. So you'll still have people, upper middle class, affluent people that will keep their vehicles. They'll enjoy their vehicles at their leisure, and they'll go to the mountains and basically keep the vehicle as their own. But for the vast majority of the population, the cost of owning a vehicle will no longer make sense. If you're a struggling student, single parent, someone that's facing bankruptcy or had real financial hardship, one of the first things that's going to go is that car, because you simply won't be able to afford it. However, you will be able to afford an app on your phone, and you will be able to afford 20 cents per mile ride hailing from where you live to your work or to some other spot that you need to travel to. And that'll be a huge cost savings, and it'll remove the insurance, gas, maintenance, parking, all the stuff that goes with car ownership that's very expensive, that none of us likes, right? So moving on, guys, to the energy equation, because this is what I started the video on. All these EVs discussed earlier can be used as energy storage system aiding the grid. So it's not a huge use today as of yet, but in the future, that big battery in a vehicle, if you're the owner of that vehicle, will be able to help you with your energy bills in your home, right? So this is not going to be a huge, problem to utilize that stored energy in your car, right? 100% solar, wind, and batteries is just the beginning of the energy disruption. That's just the start, okay? There's lots more. These convergences that I've been talking about that are going to come and disrupt the old way of doing things. Excuse me. Even though executives from utilities, even today, still believe that reality of renewables running things is not possible, right? Because when Tony makes these presentations, and he's been right for the longest time, over a decade, he still has executives from various utility companies approaching him after the talk and says, well, it's a nice talk, but it's not realistic. It's not going to happen. Maybe in 2060, 70, we can talk about this, but he's been right. So maybe we should listen to what he has to say, right? So, and notice that this approach to the problem of not making this transition possible in people's minds first and then in the actual product is basically identical to the approach by Big Auto in the 1990s to the improvement in efficiencies in their vehicles. They used a half measure, a battery hybrid technology, see the link below on more details on that, to aid the efficiency of an existing oil and gas technology, gasoline-powered vehicles, instead of offering a purely electric option, right? They made the hybrid available to clients, but they didn't make the purely EV. Now, listen to this, right? The moment they did offer a solution of pure electric, A few years later, in the GM EV1 and the Toyota RAV4 EV and a few others, the market loved it, right? You had even people at the end of their lease wanting to renew and buy the vehicle and protesting that the vehicles had to be, returned. The legacy companies, however, did not continue these programs, and they ended up scrapping them, literally. They literally crashed the vehicles, right? And they buried this program very deep and basically threw away the key not to be talked about again, triggering a company like Tesla to revisit this and create a compelling electric vehicle, right? So, but returning to energy, Tony Seba wrote in 2010, 12 years ago, that by 2020, unsubsidized solar, wind, and battery energy will be cheaper than subsidized oil, as you see in the figure. And today, we have proved that solar and wind are the cheapest sources of energy ever, with the lowest operating cost ever. Any new investment in oil and gas is already stranded today, okay? All the policy decision makers today. That's the reality of the situation. 90% of new energy generation is solar, battery and wind, while gas and coal are collapsing. It's an inverted S-curve. It's the S-curve that's going the other way on oil and gas and coal, right? The conversions of solar, wind, and batteries will become even less expensive, but up to 70% less expensive by 2030, so only 8 years away. In the US, we need only 2 to 4 days of energy storage to sustain our energy needs. So in other words, the buffer for energy that has to be available on demand in case of excessive weather has to be only 2 to 4 days, because that's how much the system would need to replenish that energy as the weather would continue to create problems. This would only cost $2 trillion over a decade. So $2 trillion is a lot of money, but spread over a decade, it's not that much, especially when you consider the amount of money we're spending on the present system of energy generation, right? California alone can generate twice the amount of energy needed by its population today using solar and wind 93% out of the days in the calendar, 93% of the time. So vast majority of the time, California can generate not the needs of the population, but double the needs, right, of energy generation. This is the most resilient energy system you can build today. If you think of Texas and the energy outage debacle of last year, of 2021, a renewable system would work far better with a 2-day storage capability in that scenario than what we had, right? Shifting gears to a Clean Technica article by Lauren Schwisberg and Mark Dyson, this article presents data currently in use. They remind us of how the power grid failed Texans last year, and that as it gets tested again coming up, the cost and efficiency of said grid will get dragged under the microscope yet again. Very much correctly so. The Texan grid is still reliant on pipelines and wellheads along the processing facilities to ensure that the fuel is delivered in time when it's needed, still today. A year ago, the issues with the old way of doing things caused a 25 gigawatt electricity shortage in Texas at a time when the energy was needed most, right? We all saw it in the news, and actually caused loss of life and extreme difficulty for many Texans. The main problem from last year, fuel supply issues, has not been fully addressed. Even now, fossil fuel power plants are showing vulnerabilities, in the face of a threat of extreme weather, hot or cold. The only way to truly guarantee the reliability of gas plants in extreme weather comes at a greater cost of what we're already paying today. A cost that clearly overshoots the equivalent reliability of the more than ever bargain-priced renewable energy sources. The article confirms that these added costs would most certainly make a new gas plant illogical and uneconomical compared to an available portfolio of renewables, as you can see in the figure. The other cost that would make the comparison even more unflattering on the oil and gas side is the upgrades and weatherization needed and the cost that it brings that will have to be added to the equation if a repeat of 2021 Texas outage is to be avoided. In conclusion, guys, to bring it all home, the main argument for renewable energy sources is that of resilience. Sure, nothing in this world is 100% efficient, right? But in light of the latest data and choice in energy generation, it is clear that a combination of maintenance-free solar, wind, and battery storage, the cost of which is still dropping, is far more desirable and reliable than maintenance-heavy oil and gas, which has shown so many cracks in its pipes and wellheads. Right. Thank you for joining me today, guys, for this video, and have a wonderful day. I will see you in the next one. Thank you.